Colossians, and man, it's been good for me. I love preaching through a book of the Bible. You know, when you preach through a book of the Bible, the danger is that when you come to a passage you don't want to preach, you have to preach it. You ever been through that, Brother Jenny? Man. Remember the one a couple weeks ago was, wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands. Now, I wanted to preach that one. But the one I didn't want to preach was the next one. Husbands, love your wives. Man, you come across some verses that you may not want to go through. And certainly, this one isn't like a controversial verse. Actually, it has a little bit of controversy to it. But it's not necessarily hard to preach as far as putting a message together. It's just, there's some details about it that weren't sitting very comfortably with me. And I'll tell you why here in just a minute. Colossians chapter number 3 and verse number 22, the Bible says, "Servants, obey in all things your masters according to the flesh, not with eye service as men pleasers, but in singleness of heart, fearing God. And whatsoever you do, do it heartily as to the Lord, and not unto men, knowing that of the Lord ye shall receive the reward of the inheritance, for ye serve the Lord Christ. But he that doeth wrong shall receive the wrong which he had done, and there is no respect of persons. Masters," chapter 4, verse 1, "give unto your servants that which is just and equal, knowing that ye also have a master in heaven." Lord, we ask you to bless this message now. We thank you for the special music today. We thank you for the singing, the giving, Lord, some fellowship that's already taken place. But now we come to the time of opening up your word, and we ask you that you would use it for your honor and glory in Jesus' name. Amen. The last two times we're in the book of Colossians, we have been studying some of the most important relationships that we have. I've already mentioned the relationship between the husband and wife, the marriage relationship. And husbands and wives are supposed to be a picture of Christ in their home. As wives submit to their husbands and husbands love their wives, we're a picture of Christ in our home, and God can be glorified in a home like that. We then saw the parental relationship between parents and children. And we see how each of these are also to be a picture of Christ in the home. How the children obey and the parents' example to their children to walk with Christ. If it's a home like that, it'll glorify the Lord. And this week we see the employment relationship. It's no different because the goal is that each person in the relationship would be a picture of Christ. As the employee honors and submits to his employer, it's a picture of how Christ honors and submits to his Father. And as the employer treats his employees right and exercises his authority in a Christ-like manner, that employer then becomes a picture of Christ and how to use authority in the workplace. I know it's the weekend, and the last thing that you guys want to do is talk about work. But we'll have to do that today. We continue our way through the book of Colossians. We need to cover this very important matter. Paul refers to those as servants and masters. And this is where the uncomfortable part comes in. Speaking with Brother Adon yesterday, and we were on our way to Home Depot to pick up a few things. And man, how much wood did we load in the back of that van, brother? Man, it wasn't just a few things, it was quite a few things. and it was my fault this time, so he's got me for the next trip. But Paul refers to those in these relationships as servants and masters. He actually refers to them this way also in Ephesians chapter 6. Just listen as I read it. He says, "Servants, be obedient unto them that are your masters according to the flesh, with fear and trembling and singleness of heart as unto Christ, not with eye service as men pleasers, but as the servants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart. With good will doing service as to the Lord and not unto men, knowing that whatsoever thing any man doeth, the same shall he receive of the Lord, whether he be bond or free. And ye masters, do the same things unto them, forbearing, threatening, knowing that your master also is in heaven, neither is there respect of persons with him." It's important to note, before we get into this meat of the passage, that things were different in Bible days. Things were different. We have seen the destructive nature of slavery in our country, and we are still fighting battles because of the wickedness of slavery in our country from hundreds of years ago. We're still battling it. Up until a few hundred years ago, slavery was a common practice in every part of the world. In every part of the world. And in many parts of the world, it is still a common practice. Slavery didn't always look like what we think of when we're reminded of our nation's history, though. I don't believe that there has ever been a time in history where it was right to own another human being. I don't believe that. And I don't believe that the Apostle Paul would say that there was a time when it's right to own another human being. Actually, in the book of Leviticus, I don't have the verse for you, but I was reading it. It actually gave me quite comfort when I was studying this because, I'm sitting here thinking, so is Paul condoning slavery here? Is he accepting of it? What's going on here? And I was battling with it for weeks. It's actually why I didn't preach it 3 weeks ago. Because I wanted to learn about it. I wanted to have a peace of mind about it before I preached the word. And there's a passage in Leviticus that talks about if your brother falls into some great debt where he needs to be sold. Now, things are different throughout history, all right? And if this brother falls into some great debt that he need to be sold, you need to bail him out. And he doesn't become your bond servant. He becomes your hired servant. So there was different types of servants. And Paul here isn't talking about the servant that is a bond servant, that is what we would consider a slave. Paul is speaking about the hired servant, the one who has been hired and given a wage. And we see that because he tells the masters to give their servants that which is just and equal. Right? And so he's not talking about slavery and he's not condoning it for 1 second. But he's talking about those who are employees and employers. I think of many hired servants in the Bible that lived in their master's homes, that were born into their master's homes. And think about Abraham and his servants. And they had wonderful relationships. And matter of fact, if Abraham didn't have a seed, his inheritance would go to his servants. Because that's how it was. It was different in Bible days. And so when you read the word servant and the word master here in Colossians chapter number 4, try not to think of it in the way we think of servants and masters throughout American history. It's much different. Today we speak of the relationship between an employer and an employee. Paul isn't fighting a social justice issue here in Colossians chapter number 4. And he writes to all parties involved in this employer-employee relationship, and he teaches them how they can honor Christ and be a picture of Christ in the workplace. And so first of all this morning, I want you to see the principles for the employed. The principles for the employed. We see, first of all, the principle of obedience. Look at verse number 22. Servants, obey in all things your masters according to the flesh. The principle of obedience. There was a man by the name of W.B. Riley. He used to tell the story of a man who had walked the streets of Philadelphia searching for employment. One day, he happened to go into the office of a well-known businessman, and this businessman's name was Mr. Gerard. And Mr. Gerard was sitting there at his desk, and this man walks in and says, "Do you have any work?" And Mr. Gerard says, "Sure I do. There's a pile of bricks over there. I want you to move it from that stack, and I want you to stack it on the other side of the yard." The man says, "All right." And he got to work. Without any hesitation, without any complaint, he walks over that pile of bricks and one by one starts carrying those bricks from one side of the yard to the other. He says, "All right, Mr. Gerard, I finished my work." Mr. Gerard handed him his paycheck, and the man says, "Sir, will there be any work tomorrow?" And he says, "Yes, get here early, and I want you to move that pile of bricks from where they are to where you found them today." He says, "Okay, sir." He showed up early the next morning, and without even asking any questions, he goes right over that pile of bricks, and he starts moving them from where he put them back to where he found them the day before. The next day, he showed up, and without even asking, he just started moving the bricks again. And the next day, he did it again, and he moved them back. And Mr. Gerard comes out there into the field, and he says, "Young man, you've done a great job this week. Here's your pay. I have a special job for you tomorrow. I want you to go down to the auction, and I want you to bid on a large quantity of sugar. And I want you to bring that sugar back." That man went down to that auction house and he bid on this large quantity of sugar. And at this time, sugar was very valuable. And he bought that sugar. And the auctioneer, and everybody's looking, who is this guy? We don't have a clue who he is. He says, "Who's paying for the sugar, son?" And he said, "Mr. Gerard, I'm his new agent." That man got himself a job. You say, "Well, how useless. Why didn't you just ask him, where do you want the bricks in 2 days? So we could just leave them right here. I don't have to do any work." No, he learned a valuable lesson in obedience. That it didn't matter what the job was, his master needed it done. And he went to do it. Does it ever seem sometimes that the task seems so menial it's not worth doing? Well, is there any task too menial when it comes to serving the Lord? I mean, you remember we serve Jesus, right? And if we're going to work and we're supposed to be a picture of Christ in the workplace, whatever our master asks us to do, whatever the boss has on the agenda that day, hey, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's work hard. Let's be obedient. Let's get the job done. We live in a world where 18 to 20-something-year-olds, they get a new job, and in a week they expect to be the CEO. It just doesn't work like that. It never has, and it never will. Actually, in most cases, employers aren't looking for the know-it-alls to promote. They're not looking for the ones that know how to do it all already. They're looking for the ones who are just willing to do the job that no one else is willing to do. Because they know if they'll be faithful to do the job that no one else is willing to do, that then one day they'll be able to do a job that nobody else can. The principle of obedience. The principle of obedience. When it comes to our work, we ought to be willing to do the job that nobody else wants, so that one day we'll be trusted to do the job that nobody else can. Titus chapter 2 and verse 9 says, exhort servants to be obedient to their masters and to please them well in all things, not answering again. 2 Timothy 6:1 says, let as many servants as are under the yoke count their own masters worthy of all honor, that the name of God and his doctrine be not blasphemed. You have a responsibility in the workplace as a Christian to honor your boss, to honor your employer. That means in the break room when everybody else is saying, man, I can't believe he's making us work overtime again. And you're like, yeah, blah, 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 kick that guy. Listen, you're not honoring your employer. No, you ought to say, hey, isn't that cool that we get an extra hour of work? Isn't that neat that we're going to get paid a time and a half of what we normally get paid to stay over? I'm going to be obedient. I'm going to serve. I'm just going to work. I'm going to do my best. I'm going to be diligent. Obedient to our master. In the workplace, the way we honor our employer is by being in subjection to them. And when we do that, it gives the Lord a good testimony. It gives the Lord a good testimony. And what a powerful testimony. When a man will put away his ego and his pride and serve his employer wholeheartedly. When the rest of the crew is slacking off, the Christian ought to be working hard. That's right. The principle of obedience. But then I want you to see the principle of integrity. Look what it says. Not with eye service as men pleasers, but in singleness of heart, fearing God. There are three kinds of people in the workplace. Those who watch things happen, those who make things happen, and those who wonder what just happened. I wonder, which one are you? Which one are you? Paul uses the word eye service. Eye service. The word eye service means sight labor. It's work that needs to be watched. Work that needs to be watched. When you give eye service, it means that you only work when someone is watching. Do-do-do. Do-do-do. Hey, boss, how you doing? I was just stacking this pack of bricks here. Right? Come on, we all know who they are. We all know who spends a lot of time in the restroom. You know what I'm talking about? We all know. We all know who they are, and hopefully they're not us. Eye service. Oh, the boss is here. I'm working. There was a company that, I forget who it was, but they were like one of those temporary labor forces. There was a company that was having a tour come through of some investors. And they wanted the investors to see the busyness of the workplace and how busy it was. So they went to a temporary labor force, and they hired like 50 people. And they said, your only job today is to look busy. It's your only job is to look busy. I don't care what you do, just look like you're doing it. Look busy. And so for $11 an hour, for 8 hours, those people sat there and looked busy. That's it. It's kind of a kickback job right there. Can I do this tomorrow? Look busy. You know, a lot of us are good at looking busy. Why don't we just get busy? See, integrity means that I am who I am no matter who's watching and no matter who's around. And so if you're slacking off when your boss isn't looking, you might as well just slack off when he is. Integrity. Integrity. This principle of integrity. A group of men gathered one Saturday morning to help paint a friend's large 2-story home, and they were painting all the eaves, they were painting all the around the walls and the trim and all that, and they were finally done, this group of friends. But there was one board up at the top that you couldn't see from the ground. You could only see it from up above. And so all the guys were like, man, we've already packed up the paint. We've already pulled down the ladder. I mean, nobody's going to see it. Let's just leave it. And one man stood up and says, no, God sees it. God sees it. It's easy to just leave things undone when we can sweep them under the rug for our employer not to see or whatever. But can I just tell you that everything we do in the workplace, God sees it. Let's be diligent. Let's take ownership. Knowing that if I'm diligent, I'm full of integrity, that I'm obedient to my boss, then God's going to bless me for that. So I want to honor him by honoring my employer. We see the principle of obedience. We see the principle of integrity. And by the way, in the whole thing about integrity, I read a statistic that says that, I forget what it is, but it's 20 minutes a day or something like that. 20 minutes a day that people just stare at their phones while they're supposed to be working. It's probably more than that. Come on, it's probably more than that. Let's get real. But if 20 minutes a day they stare at their phone, at the end of a year, it's a whole week's worth of wages. So when we slack off and we think, it's just 10 minutes, but then it's 10 minutes tomorrow, and it's 30 minutes the next day, and it's 15 minutes the next day, listen, by the end of the year, we've just stolen a whole week worth of work from our boss. Let us be people of integrity. Listen, when our boss hires us for an hourly wage, and listen, there's rules. We have to have so many breaks every so many hours and lunches and all this kind of stuff. Take your lunches and take them hard, man. Eat that steak in the break room and enjoy that burger from Bravo Burger, whatever it is. Take that break hard. But while you're at work, be full of integrity and let it not be once said that you're wasting your employer's money and time. Be people of integrity. We see the principle of obedience, the principle of integrity, but then we see the principle of diligence. He says, whatsoever ye do, do it heartily as to the Lord and not unto men. Do it heartily. You know who Michelangelo is, right? No, not the Ninja Turtle. Okay? No, Michelangelo and Donatello, they were sculptors. Okay? And Donatello was a great sculptor, the greatest of his time, and Michelangelo was a great sculptor, the greatest of his time. But we don't know the man that was in between them, the student of Donatello and the instructor of Michelangelo. You see, this man's name was Bertoldo, and even the most enthusiastic art student may not even know his name. It was when Michelangelo was 14 years old, he came to Bertoldo, and he was already obviously just enormous in talent, and man, talent was just oozing out of this guy. Well, one day, Bertoldo came into the workshop, and he noticed that Michelangelo was sculpting a piece that was well below his abilities. And he was just playing around with it, just having fun and playing around with this sculpture. Bertoldo went and grabbed the biggest hammer he could find in the workshop, walked right over to there while Michelangelo was grabbing a chisel, and he smashed that sculpture into pieces. And he looked at Michelangelo and he said, "Talent is cheap. Talent is cheap. Talent is cheap. Dedication, Michelangelo, is costly. Dedication is costly." Folks, talent's cheap. There are many people in our world today that are oozing with talent. But unless we're willing to put our talent to the grinding stone of dedication, it won't mean anything. Michelangelo learned a lesson, and today you know his name. You've probably never even seen something he sculpted, but you know his name. Why? Dedication. He learned a lesson. Let us not rely on our talents, but let us put in the work. Dedication. You won't succeed like Michelangelo without diligence. Talent can only get you so far. Diligence will take you the rest of the way. We must be diligent because there's another truth that Paul shares with us, those of us that are subject unto a master. He says in verse 24, knowing that of the Lord ye shall receive the reward of inheritance, for ye serve the Lord Christ. But he that doeth wrong shall receive the wrong that he hath done, and there is no respect of persons. There was a man by the name of Kenneth Galbraith. He was a noted economist in the early 1900s. He was called upon by many dignitaries to give his advice and different things. And he'd had a busy day, and so he came home and he told his housekeeper, Emily, he says, hold the phone, I'm going to go take a nap. And so this man went, Kenneth Galbraith, he went and took a nap, and just shortly after he had laid down, the phone rang. Ring, 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 ring. Emily answered the phone, his housekeeper. Hello, Galbraith residence. Put Mr. Galbraith on the phone. This is Lyndon B. Johnson, the President of the United States. And Emily says, no, sir, he's taking a nap. And he says, ma'am, I'm the President of the United States. I need to speak to Ken now. And she said, as soon as he wakes up, sir, I will give him the note. I don't work for you, Mr. President. She said it just like that. I don't work for you, Mr. President. Well, another few hours passed, and Kenneth Galbraith wakes up from his nap, and she gives him the note. Lyndon B. Johnson called. He'd like you to return the call. He gets on the phone and calls the president, and the first thing the president says, I want you to send Emily to the White House to work for me. Because she knows who her boss is. Listen, do you know who your boss is? Where your real loyalties are? It goes far beyond who employs you and writes inside your paycheck. Your real boss is Jesus Christ himself. The one that you answer to for what happens in the workplace. Oh, you might get a raise, you might get written up. But there's a day you're going to stand before the judge of all the earth and have to give an account for this life. How'd you handle your workplace relationships? How'd you handle working for your boss? Because really, you better know who your real boss is. Your real boss isn't Dr. Pepper Snapple, City of Hesperia. Your real boss isn't Uber or wherever else. Your real boss is Jesus Christ. And you honor your employer, your earthly master, and he will bless you. Take it to the bank. He will bless you. Principles for the employee. But then, this morning as we finish up, I want you to see the principles for the employer. Now, for some, both of these sets of principles apply. You may be in management or supervisor, mid-level management, a business owner, and these principles apply to you just like the first set of principles did. There's 4 or 5 verses dedicated to the servant. Did you notice that? There's 1 verse dedicated to the master. Now, don't misunderstand. The principles found here to the master are just as potent, just as important as the ones to the employer. I want you to consider the first one. The principle of equity. The principle of equity. Masters, give unto your servants that which is just and equal. Now, this is talking about pay. That's what this is talking about. It's talking about paying your employees. Give unto your servants that which is just and equal. Those who work for you deserve to be paid fairly. They do. They deserve it. Because God told you to pay them fairly. The Christian employer ought to give the best wages in town. I believe it. The Christian employer ought to give the best wages in town. The Christian employer ought not to cheat his employees out of a dime. If you're a Christian supervisor or manager, when it comes time for those reviews for the employees that are under you, you ought to go to bat for them to get them the best raise they can get, to get them the best bonus they could get. Listen, we live in a dog-eat-dog world out there, and we ought to have some Christian managers and supervisors that ought to start stepping up for their employees. Go to bat for them. Go to the owner of the company and say, this guy deserves a raise. We cannot let him leave this company and go somewhere else and beat us. We've got to give him a raise. He's the hardest worker we know. Whatever we ask him to do, he does it. Give him a raise. Now, listen, it says give him that which is just and equal. the guy's slacking off, fire the guy. This isn't saying that Christian bosses need to be pushovers and roll over dead. No, give them that which is just and equal. If it's just and equal to fire the guy and hire somebody that'll do the job better, then fire the guy. But when it comes to paying our employees, pay them right. Pay them well. Pay them more than they deserve. Why? Because it honors the Lord. Give unto your servants that which is just and equal. I've known some bosses that try to cut down the expenses in order to earn some bigger bonus at the end of the year. And so what they do is they start cutting everybody's hours while expecting them to do the same amount of work. You know what that is? That's what was happening in Egypt. The slave drivers, that they stopped giving them the straw to make stronger mortar, and they started breaking their backs and whipping them. Listen, we don't need slave drivers. We need leaders. And leaders are willing to put their bonus on the line to better the company and help their employees get a better wage. Give your servants that which is just and equal. I have a feeling that when people love the place they work and the people they work for, they work harder and enjoy it. I remember I worked at a company called Desert Electric Supply. We had a boss there. His name was Randy. He was a Christian man. He was a good man. He was kind. I remember that about Randy. He was kind. Just a kind man. And I know he was a kind man and kind by nature because I cost that company a lot of money one day. A lot of money one day. Hopefully this isn't on record if I ever try to get a forklift job. I was stacking a pallet on the third rack of our warehouse shelves. We had these big metal racks and stack our pallets on these racks. Instead of stacking pallets on top of each other, we had individual shelves for them. And it was the highest rack. And right as I was getting ready to pull out the forks out of that pallet, my supervisor came over and he kind of said something. I don't know if he was upset or whatever, but he said something, and it was a long conversation. And now the whole time that conversation was going, those forks are still up there in that pallet. And so we finished this conversation, and now I've been distracted. Now it's not his fault, it's mine. I was the operator. I'm distracted, forgot what was going on. I pulled out, and I just drove away with those forks 12 feet up in the air. Now, the bay door to get outside was not 12 feet. The bay door to get outside of the warehouse was somewhere around 10 feet. The forks were 12 feet. And I'd been driving forklifts for a long time. My dad worked in warehouses when I was a kid, TJ's age. He would let me hop on a forklift and drive around the warehouse. Don't tell OSHA, all right? I've been driving forklifts a long time. I'd never had a big accident. I was driving. I was confident. I mashed the gas to go out of there. There was nobody in my way. It was one of those electric ones, forklifts. It was electric, and it was a stand-up one, and I'd push that joystick down, and I didn't know the forks were 12 feet in the air. As you can imagine what happened. Nobody warned me. It was silent. We had customers all inside the inside of the offices, and I ran that forklift. Those forks stuck straight through the outside of that building. And I busted that bay door where it swung open. I sheared off the steel beam. Randy came out, and he looked up. And then the owner of the company came out. He wasn't as nice. The owner, the guy who's going to have to pay to fix this, came out. And he looks up. Well, I don't think Thomas is ever going to drive a forklift again. And Randy put his arm around me and says, "You all right, man?" I said, "Yeah, I'm all right." He goes, "You hurt?" I said, "I think just my ego a little bit." He says, "All right." He goes, "Hop on that forklift, pull those forks out, set them on the ground, and get back to work." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "I'm not fired?" He said, "Did you do it on purpose?" And I said, "No." He goes, "Accidents happen, man. Let's get to work." The best boss I've ever had. I will tell you this, the next year and a half of stepping on a forklift, I never once drove with those blades anywhere but on the ground. I was nervous. And my face hurt a little bit from hitting the glass in front of me when I jammed into the thing. Man, I was nervous. But Randy, he made such an impression on me. He would come out into the warehouse and just kind of help stack pallets and ask about how your week's going. He would go around just every day just to say hi to every employee, see how their week's going, seeing if they needed anything. He was an just an outspoken Christian. He loved the Lord. I wanted to work for that guy. And everybody there enjoyed working for him. And at the end of the year, that company was doing better and better every year. Why? Because they had a guy like Randy leading the show. And they paid their employees that which was just and equal. Every Christmas. Didn't matter if you were a delivery driver. Didn't matter if you were for a warehouse guy that messed up on the forklifts. It didn't matter if you were the sales guy. Every Thanksgiving, they gave you a turkey. Every Christmas, they gave you a bonus. They were just great to work for. I know everybody's here going, where can I fill out an application, right? I loved working there. And that business thrived. Let me challenge you. If you are in the employer category, do some research. The companies that use God's system of treating their employees well, they thrive. They do. The companies that use God's system of treating their employees well thrive. Now, I wonder, is it any surprise that in a Wendy's parking lot where there's also an In-N-Out, that the In-N-Out has a line around the corner and the Wendy's can hear crickets? Is there any surprise to that? Why? Because In-N-Out pays their employees well. One of the best paid fast food restaurants there is. Is there? I remember I don't remember where we were, but there was 2 chicken places in the same parking lot. You get chicken sandwiches at both of these places. Good chicken sandwiches at both of them. One claims they have the best chicken sandwich ever, and the other actually has the best chicken sandwich ever. Popeyes and Chick-fil-A. Right? Now, I don't know if Chick-fil-A actually has the best chicken sandwich, but I want to go there. Why? Because their employees are best customer service, their employees like working there, and that business thrives. Now, you say, Pastor, is this about fast food and Chick-fil-A? Chick-fil-A's closed. You shouldn't even talk about it on Sunday. Why are you even bringing up their name? We can't even go. Right? They're stoning me here in just a minute. But they thrive. They thrive. Why? Because they use God's system of taking care of their employees. I believe it. Pay your employees well, treat them right, and God will honor you. There's one more principle, and this applies to everyone. It's the principle of authority. The principle of authority. It says, knowing that ye also have a master in heaven. The Christian employer will do well to remember that all of us, whether the boss or the subordinate, is subject ultimately unto our God in heaven. The reason that we serve our earthly masters wholeheartedly is because we ultimately serve the master in heaven, who deserves our loyal service. And the reason we treat our employees right and pay them fairly and care for their needs is because we have a master in heaven who does the same for us. Workplace relationships can be some of the most difficult relationships that we have. Some of us have had bosses that mistreat us, they abuse our time, they work us ragged. And God says, honor them. Honor them. Every penny that you are given, earn it. Earn it. And be a picture of Christ in your workplace. Employers, treat your employees right. Honor them. Pay them well. Treat them fairly. And if both parties will get this and understand this, I am very confident that God will bless whatever business that is. Confident. As we close this morning, I want to give you a challenge. Whatever you do for work, don't make your career what identifies you. You know, you might be asked, so what is it that you do? Well, if you ask what I do, I work here. But if you're asking who I am, I'm a Christian. I'm a follower of Christ. I don't identify with my work. Now, that's what our world does. Oh, he's the police officer. Oh, he's the construction worker. Oh, he's the electrician. Oh, he's the this or that. No. That's what they do. And if you make that about who you are, then, man, you're missing out. Don't make what you do about who you are. No, be a Christian. And use your workplace as a ministry. That this is a place that I get to go. Like, think about how cool this is. Just change your perspective a little bit. This is a place where I get to go, and they actually pay me to go there, and I can be a godly influence on those people that are there. I get paid to minister to those people. Change your perspective. I get paid to go and minister to these people. They're my ministry. I get to see them every day, and I get to work hard for my Savior, and they get to watch it. They get to see my testimony every day of me working and laboring for my master. And then in the break room, I get to talk to them about things that are happening at my church and about my Lord and about the scriptures. And I get to talk to them about their salvation. I mean, this is my ministry. Those people are who God has called me to reach. Because I can't go into your workplace and sit in the break room with your people. Those are your people. That's your church. You need to pastor those folks. You need to go in there and witness to them and preach the gospel to them. And you need to be a good testimony to them. It's your workplace. It's your ministry. We got to stop seeing it as, I'm just earning a dime, pay the bills. No. I get to go into somewhere and show them a picture of Jesus Christ that they're not going to see anywhere else. I get to show them what a Christian does as working hard for his Savior. And I get to show them the joy that is on my face for serving my master. Change your perspective. God might use you in your workplace. Just turn that place upside down for Him. That'd be a blessing to hear of some of your coworkers getting saved and see them come into our church and be baptized and added to the church and discipled. Man, that'd be a blessing. But it won't happen if we don't treat our workplace like the ministry that it really is. It's just what you do. It's not who you are. Make your workplace a ministry. And in this ministry, let us be diligent to show those in our home, those in our workplace, a picture of Christ. Lord, thank you for this time that we've had in your word today. Lord, I thank you for